I remember the day the idea first came to me. It wasn't planned. It wasn't part of some grand social experiment. It was born from a quiet ache in my heart, the kind you feel when you start to notice how the world moves differently around people, depending on what they wear, where they live, or how much money they have. I had seen it too many times, how a poor woman asking for directions was treated like a burden, while someone dressed well was greeted with smiles and patience. And I thought to myself, what if I switched places for a day? What if I became the one people looked past? Would I still see kindness in their eyes? Or would I see something else, something colder, something real? That thought lingered in me for days. It followed me when I walked through busy streets, when I sat in cafes, when I watched people pass by beggars as if they were invisible. It wasn't judgment I felt, it was curiosity mixed with sadness. I wanted to understand the distance between hearts. I wanted to see what love, compassion, and humility looked like when there was no wealth to impress, no comfort to shield me. So I decided to do it, to step into the life of a poor mother just for one day and see the truth with my own eyes. The more I thought about it, the more nervous I became. This wasn't a role for a stage. It was a mirror for my soul. I wasn't preparing lines or rehearsing expressions. I was preparing to let go of my identity, to see how much of me people could still see when my appearance no longer spoke for me. I wanted to feel the weight of judgment, the sting of rejection, the silence that follows when people think you're not worth their time. I knew it would be hard, but I also knew it would be honest. The night before I sat alone and looked at my reflection in the mirror, I saw a woman who had known comfort, who had never truly felt invisible, and I wondered, what if I were born into different circumstances? Would I still be respected? Would people still listen to my voice? Or would it fade into the noise of the crowd like so many others do? That question pierced me deeply. Because the truth is, most of us don't realize how privileged we are. Not just in money, but in attention, and how easily we are seen and heard. I wanted to walk through a day without that privilege, to experience the world from the shadows. When morning came, I put on an old, faded dress. My hair was left untamed, my hands bare. I didn't try to look pitiful. I just wanted to look ordinary, unnoticed. The kind of woman who could sit on a park bench and no one would remember she was ever there. As I looked at myself before leaving the house, I felt a strange mix of fear and freedom. Fear, because I didn't know what I would face. Freedom, because for the first time, no one would know my name, my status, or my story. I was simply another woman trying to make it through the day. Stepping out into the world felt like stepping into another universe. The air was the same, the streets were the same, but the eyes that met mine were different. I could feel the way people's gazes slid past me, how they avoided eye contact, how a small smile I offered went unanswered. It was subtle at first, but powerful. The realization that value in this world is often measured not by who you are, but by what you look like, hit me harder than I expected. And with every step I took, I began to see the truth I had once only imagined. That day, I wasn't just pretending to be poor. I was living the quiet pain of being unseen. Every glance that turned away, every conversation that died before it began, felt like a tiny cut on the heart. And yet, within that silence, I began to see beauty too. I saw the resilience in the faces of those who had learned to live in this invisibility. I saw the quiet strength of people who didn't need the world's attention to know their worth. I saw humanity in its rawest form, both cruel and beautiful at the same time. The idea had started as a small curiosity, a thought, experiment to test perception. But what it gave me was something far greater. It gave me truth, the kind that doesn't shout, it whispers. It taught me that empathy cannot be learned by reading or hearing, it must be felt. And to feel it, sometimes you have to lose everything that makes you feel safe, respected, or seen. Only then do you understand the true weight of dignity and how precious it is to those who are denied it. That was the beginning of my journey. The moment I stepped out of my world and into another, I thought I was playing a role. I didn't realize I was about to witness the truest performance of all, the world's reaction to the face of poverty. And I was not ready for how deeply it would change me. Preparing for that day was unlike preparing for anything I had ever done before. It wasn't about getting into costume or memorizing lines. It was about stripping away every piece of myself that the world recognized. I wasn't just changing clothes, I was changing presence, energy, and the way I carried myself. Because I knew one thing: if I wanted to see the truth, I couldn't let even a trace of who I really was show through. People had to see me as they would any other struggling mother on the street, someone tired, unnoticed, and unimportant in their eyes. And to do that, I had to start by letting go of pride. I remember opening my closet and realizing that nothing I owned fit the life I wanted to portray. Everything was too neat, too polished, too obviously taken care of. So I found an old dress I hadn't worn in years, one that had lost its color and its life. I wrinkled it even more, rubbed it with a little dust, and let it hang loosely on me. I looked in the mirror, and for a moment, I didn't see myself. I saw someone else, someone who had faced years of hard days, whose dreams had grown quiet, but whose heart was still holding on. That reflection was humbling. I didn't look pitiful. I looked real. And that, I realized, was the point. I wanted people to see. Not a performance, but a person. Then came the face. I didn't want makeup, I wanted truth. So I washed my face clean, let my hair fall uncombed, and allowed the natural tiredness of my eyes to show. There's something powerful about removing every mask we wear. Without the polish, without the presentation, you start to see yourself as you really are, fragile, human, and honest. And in that honesty, I felt a kind of strength I hadn't known before. I was ready to step into a different world. But before I left, I paused. I sat down and thought about the emotions I wanted to carry with me. I couldn't just walk out and pretend. I needed to feel the story inside me. I imagined what it must be like to wake up every morning with children to feed and bills unpaid, to have dreams that the world had forgotten. I thought of the quiet desperation that lives in the hearts of mothers who sacrifice everything, yet still get judged by how little they have. I thought about their fears, their pride, their endless endurance. The more I felt it, the heavier my chest became. It was no longer a role. It was a reflection of lives I had overlooked, and it demanded honesty from me. As I prepared to leave, I realized how different this day would be. Usually, when I step out into the world, I walk with confidence. My head is high, my stride sure. But that morning, I had to change that. I softened my steps, slowed my pace, lowered my eyes. I learned the body language of humility, the kind that comes not from choice, but from life's weariness. It was a small shift, yet it changed everything about how people saw me. Confidence draws attention, but struggle makes you invisible. I was beginning to understand that. I also decided not to carry a phone or wallet, nothing that tied me to comfort. I wanted to feel the uncertainty, the small fear of not having control. I wanted to walk through the world depending only on what people offered me through their eyes and their hearts. It was a strange feeling, realizing how vulnerable it made me. We don't notice how much security money, appearance, and status give us until we remove them. Without them, you stand naked before the world, not physically, but emotionally. And you see how fragile human dignity truly is. As I stepped out of the house, the morning air felt heavier than usual. Every sound, the traffic, the chatter, the footsteps, felt distant. For the first time, I wasn't part of the rhythm of the world. I was outside of it, watching it move without me. And that feeling, it's one I'll never forget, because that was when it hit me, how easy it is for people to disappear in plain sight, how many faces we pass every day without a second thought, how many hearts are silently breaking beside us while we scroll through our phones or rush to our destinations. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, "Don't act, feel." That became my mantra for the day. I wasn't there to perform, I was there to understand. Every step, every glance, every silence would be a lesson. I wasn't just about to test the world's compassion, I was about to test my own. Could I walk through judgment and still keep love in my heart? Could I see cruelty and still believe in kindness? As I reached the corner of the street and saw the world looking back at me through new eyes, I knew I was ready to experience what truth really looks like when the mask of comfort is gone, ready to face a mirror that doesn't lie, ready to learn what humanity truly feels like when you have nothing left but your heart. The first steps I took into the world that day felt different, heavier somehow. I could feel the weight of my disguise pressing against my spirit. My heart was calm, but there was a quiet trembling inside me, like walking into a storm you can't quite see yet. The street was alive with movement, cars rushing by, people talking on phones, the smell of food from a nearby stall. Everything looked the same, but I wasn't part of it anymore. I was invisible now. And invisibility, I learned, doesn't come from disappearing. It comes from being seen and ignored. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining it. The way people's eyes skimmed past me, how a man at the fruit stand looked straight through me as if I were a shadow. I smiled at him gently, hoping for even the smallest acknowledgement, but he turned his back before I finished the smile. A small thing, right? But that small moment felt enormous. It was my first taste of what it's like to live in the quiet space between existence and absence. I walked further down the street, trying to hold my composure, observing everything. Two women stood outside a cafe laughing over coffee. I wanted to ask them the time, just the time, but when I approached, their laughter stopped. One clutched her bag a little closer, the other looked away. I asked softly, but before I could finish my question, one of them muttered, "I don't know," even though she had a watch on her wrist. They turned their backs and their laughter returned the moment I walked away. And that laugh, it wasn't the same as before. It was sharper now, as if my presence had left a stain they wanted to wash off with noise. I kept walking, pretending it didn't hurt, but inside, something in me was breaking apart. I had expected judgment. I hadn't expected the silence, the way it felt like a wall between me and the world, the kind of silence that doesn't just keep you out, it makes you feel like you never belonged in the first place. I stopped by a park bench to rest. An elderly couple sat on the next bench, feeding birds, smiling at everyone who passed. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd smile at me too. So I sat quietly, close enough for them to notice, but not too close to intrude. The woman looked at me once, whispered something to her husband, and they stood up and left. Their crumbs for the birds still scattered on the ground. I stared at those crumbs for a long time, wondering if that was how the world saw people like the one I was pretending to be, crumbs of humanity, barely worth noticing. As the day went on, the pattern became clear. Doors closed faster, voices grew colder. People crossed the street to avoid me. Not one person asked if I needed help, if I was all right, if I had eaten. No one even asked my name. The world around me was full of sound, yet I had never felt such quiet inside myself. The kind of quiet that comes when no one's words are meant for you, but amidst all that rejection, there were small flickers of humanity that almost went unnoticed. A young boy ran past me and dropped his toy car. I picked it up and handed it to him, expecting his mother to pull him away. Instead, the boy smiled, took it, and said thank you before running off again. It was such a simple thing, but that thank you was like a drop of light in a long stretch of darkness. It reminded me that kindness isn't gone. It's just hiding behind fear, behind judgment, behind the way society teaches us to look the other way. As the sun began to set, I walked through a narrow street lined with small shops. My legs were tired, my spirit even more so. I passed by a bakery and the smell of bread made my stomach twist. The man inside looked at me and then at the empty shelves beside him. I didn't say a word, just looked through the glass. He frowned, shook his head, and closed the display window. It wasn't anger in his face, it was discomfort. The kind people feel when they don't know what to do with someone who reminds them of life's unfairness. I walked away, not angry, not even sad, just hollow. That was the moment I began to understand something powerful. It's not that people are cruel by nature, it's that they're afraid to feel. Afraid that compassion might demand something of them, afraid that caring might cost them comfort, and so they choose distance over empathy, silence over kindness. By the time I returned home, I felt like a stranger to the world I thought I knew. The first encounters had shown me more truth than I had been ready for. The truth that the line between dignity and disregard is thinner than we think, and for many, that line is drawn by nothing more than appearance. That day, I didn't just see the world differently, I saw myself differently too. There was one moment that I can never forget, a moment so sharp, so unexpected, that it pierced straight through me. I had made it through most of the day by then, walking through streets, sitting in parks, stopping by markets. I had seen enough to know how invisible a poor mother could become in the eyes of the world. But I wasn't prepared for the pain that came when I decided to visit a place that once felt like home, a place where people knew me, cared for me, respected me. I wanted to see if familiarity would recognize me beneath the disguise. I wanted to believe that love could see through the surface. That belief didn't last long. I walked toward the cafe where I used to spend mornings with friends, a small place that held memories of laughter and warmth. I stood outside for a while, just watching through the glass window. The same people were there, sitting in the same corner, sipping coffee, talking about life, as if nothing had changed. And yet everything had changed, because I was no longer one of them. I gathered my courage and stepped inside. The bell above the door rang softly, and for a brief moment they all looked up. Their faces turned toward me, but their eyes did not recognize me. I smiled gently, hoping someone would notice, maybe offer a hello, maybe even a curious question. But what I received was silence. Not the comfortable kind, the cold kind that fills a room when presence becomes unwanted. One of them whispered something under their breath. Another looked away, pretending to be lost in conversation. I walked closer, greeted them softly, but the greeting fell flat. No one responded. No one even smiled. Finally, one of the staff members came toward me, not with kindness, but with caution. He asked, "Ma'am, can I help you?" His tone wasn't warm. It was the tone people use when they want you to leave without saying it directly. I told him I was just here to say hello to an old friend. He hesitated, then glanced at the table where my friends sat, as if asking for their silent approval. One of them gave a small nod, not of recognition, but of discomfort. The message was clear: they didn't know me, or maybe they didn't want to. I stood there for a moment, frozen in place, the sound of their laughter echoing softly behind me. The kind of laughter that stings because you know it used to include you. I turned to leave, and as I did, I heard someone say quietly, "Poor thing must have lost her way." That sentence hit me like a knife. Not because of the words themselves, but because of who said them. A person I had once called family. A person I had trusted, shared dreams with, someone who knew my heart. Hearing those words in that voice broke something inside me that I didn't know could break. I walked out of that cafe into the fading light, my heart heavy and my eyes wet, not from the sting of rejection alone, but from the realization of how fragile connection truly is, how quickly respect can fade when appearance changes, how easily love can become conditional without anyone ever admitting it. I thought about all the people in the world who live that kind of pain every day, not as an experiment, but as their reality. People who are judged before they are heard, dismissed before they are understood, and forgotten before they are even known. As I walked down that road, the tears came quietly, not for myself, but for every person who has ever been looked at with pity instead of compassion, suspicion instead of trust, disgust instead of empathy. I had stepped into this role to learn, to understand, and now I understood more than I wanted to. That single moment taught me that the cruelest kind of rejection doesn't come from strangers, it comes from the familiar faces that turn cold. It comes from love that vanishes when status disappears. It comes from the silence of people who once said they cared. That was the moment I realized how deep the illusion runs. People don't always love you. They love the image of you that fits their comfort. And the second that image breaks, so does their kindness. I stood still at the corner of the street for a long time, letting that truth sink in. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the road, and in that light, I saw something clearly for the first time. I saw how easily the world divides people into categories: worthy and unworthy, clean and unclean, respected and forgotten. I saw that what breaks hearts isn't poverty itself, but the way others react to it. And as I stood there, I realized that the disguise I wore had done its job. It showed me not just how people see the poor, but how they fail to see the human being inside. And that, more than anything else that day, was what truly broke my heart. When I returned home that evening, I felt like I had lived a lifetime in a single day. My body was tired, but it was my spirit that felt truly exhausted. Every step I had taken, every face that had turned away, every word left unspoken, it all lingered in me like echoes in an empty hall. I sat down and closed my eyes, replaying the day in silence, and that's when the lesson began to unfold. Because what I experienced wasn't just about how others treated me, it was about what it revealed within me. The pain of that day was a teacher, and the lesson it brought was sharper and deeper than anything I could have imagined. I realized that people don't always see others as they are, they see them through the lens of what they think they deserve. Kindness becomes selective. Respect becomes conditional, and empathy, it becomes a luxury, reserved for those who look like they've earned it. That truth hit me hard. I had always believed in goodness, in the warmth of humanity, but now I saw that goodness often hides behind comfort. It shows up when it's easy, but disappears when compassion requires effort. As I sat there thinking, I couldn't help but reflect on the irony of it all, how quickly people's perceptions shift based on nothing more than appearance, how fragile dignity becomes when the world decides your worth. I thought about the people I had met that day, the ones who looked away, the ones who judged, the ones who whispered, and strangely, I didn't feel anger toward them. I felt understanding. Because I realized something profound, people don't turn cold because they're heartless. They turn cold because they're afraid of getting too close to pain, afraid of what they might see in themselves if they looked at suffering long enough. We build walls around our comfort zones, not to keep others out, but to keep our conscience quiet. That's what I saw so clearly that day. Compassion is not about feeling sorry for someone. It's about seeing yourself in them. And that's the part most people can't handle. Because if you truly saw yourself in the eyes of a struggling mother, you'd have to admit that life is fragile, that the line between them and you is thinner than you think. The reaction that broke my heart wasn't just the rejection I faced, it was the reflection of a world that's forgotten how to feel deeply. We've become experts at sympathy from a distance. We can post about kindness, talk about empathy, donate when it's convenient, but when compassion demands presence, silence takes its place. That's what I learned watching people cross the street to avoid me, pretending not to notice. They weren't just avoiding me. They were avoiding the truth that one twist of fate could have put them in my place. But here's where the real lesson came, the lesson that changed me. I realized that dignity doesn't come from how others see you. It comes from how you choose to see yourself. That day, when the world turned away, I found myself turning inward. I discovered a strength I never knew I had, the strength to remain kind even when kindness wasn't returned. I understood that real compassion begins when you choose to love even those who withhold it from you. That's the kind of love that transforms, the kind that heals. As I looked back on every cruel glance, every cold word, I began to see something deeper. Those moments weren't meant to break me. They were meant to open me, to make me see the world not with eyes of judgment, but with eyes of grace. Because the truth is, we all wear masks. Some wear wealth, some wear pride, some wear indifference. But underneath it all, every human being carries the same fragile heart, craving the same simple thing, to be seen, to be valued, to be loved. That experience became my mirror. It reflected not only the flaws of others, but my own blindness too. How many times had I walked past someone in need? How many times had I turned away out of convenience? The truth was uncomfortable, but it was real. And in that truth, I found my awakening. I learned that compassion is not something we give out of superiority. It's something we share out of equality. When you can look into the eyes of someone broken and see your own reflection, that's when humanity begins to heal. And if the pain I felt that day taught me anything, it's that love means nothing until it crosses the lines we draw between us. That was the lesson behind the pain, a lesson I will never forget. When I woke up the next morning, something inside me felt different. The world around me was the same streets, the same sounds, the same light coming through the window, but I was not the same woman who had stepped out of her home the day before. That day had stripped away so many illusions I didn't even know I had. It had torn open the quiet layers of comfort I'd lived behind. It had shown me the truth of people, the truth of perception, and most importantly, the truth of myself. I sat for a long time just thinking, replaying the faces, the voices, the silence. Every look of rejection, every kind word, every moment of being unseen, all of it had carved something new into me. I realized that the disguise I had worn wasn't just a costume. It had become a mirror. It showed me not only how people saw me, but how I had seen others my whole life. I had looked at poverty before, but I had never really seen it. I had passed by sadness before, but I had never really felt it. That's what changed me. The experience forced me to look through the eyes of the forgotten, and once you see the world that way, you can never unsee it. There's a strange kind of power that comes from humility. It's quiet, but it's unshakable. The day before, I had felt powerless in front of people's judgment, but afterward, I realized that power doesn't come from what you have. It comes from what you understand. When you understand pain, you gain patience. When you understand rejection, you gain empathy. And when you understand loneliness, you gain the ability to make others feel seen. That's what transformation feels like. Not loud or grand, but still, steady, and deeply human. I started to see life through a softer lens. I noticed the small things, the street cleaner working before sunrise, the woman selling fruit with tired eyes, the man sitting alone on the curb. They weren't background figures anymore. They were stories, each one full of invisible strength. I began to smile at them, speak to them, listen to them, and every time I did, something magical happened. Walls dissolved. I realized that connection doesn't require wealth, education, or status. It only requires presence. Just being there without judgment, without agenda, opens hearts in ways that material things never can. That realization changed how I lived. I stopped trying to impress and started trying to understand. I stopped rushing and started noticing. I stopped assuming and started asking. And with every act of kindness, no matter how small, I felt a part of that. Heartbreak from before slowly healing, not because others had changed, but because I had. The truth is, you can't change how people see the world until you change how you see it yourself. That's where transformation begins, inside. There were moments when I still felt the sting of what had happened, especially when I remembered the familiar faces that turned away. But even that pain found purpose. It reminded me that forgiveness isn't about excusing someone's behavior. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of it. I learned to forgive not because they deserved it, but because holding on to bitterness would have kept me trapped in that disguise forever. And I had already lived one day in someone else's pain. I didn't need to carry it for a lifetime. So I made a quiet promise to myself to live differently, to lead with compassion instead of comfort, to see worth in every soul I meet, to never let appearance decide my attitude. Because I had learned something the hard way. When you treat people with genuine kindness, you don't just lift them, you lift yourself. Empathy has a way of filling the empty places in your heart that judgment can never reach. Over time, the memory of that day became more than just a story. It became a compass. Whenever I catch myself drifting into indifference, I remember how it felt to be invisible. Whenever I see someone struggling, I remember how powerful a single smile can be. Whenever I meet people who act with cruelty, I remind myself that their coldness comes from their own unseen wounds. The world looks different when you start seeing people as reflections instead of strangers. That experience didn't just change how I look at others, it changed how I look at life itself. It taught me that real beauty doesn't come from what shines on the surface, it comes from what glows quietly within. It taught me that strength isn't about being untouched by hardship, it's about keeping your heart soft even when the world tries to harden it, and it taught me that love, in its purest form, doesn't need recognition. It just needs expression. So now, when I see someone sitting alone, when I hear someone's voice tremble, when I notice eyes that carry the same loneliness I once felt, I don't look away. I reach out, even if it's just with a smile. Because sometimes that small gesture can remind someone that they still matter. And maybe that's the real transformation. To live in such a way that no one who crosses your path ever feels unseen again.